It was a quiet night in suburban Melbourne. The kind of night where families feel safe, where homes are supposed to be a sanctuary. But inside one of these homes, a nightmare was unfolding. A 23-year-old woman, asleep in her own bed, had no idea that just outside her window, a man stood watching. A man who had been watching her, thinking about her, obsessed with her. And tonight, he had decided this would be her last. His name was Louis Seiko. And for months he had been fixated on Celeste Manno. She was kind to him once, and he mistook that kindness for something more. What started as friendly workplace interactions soon spiraled into something sinister: unwanted messages, obsessive thoughts, relentless stalking. And then, in the early hours of November 16, 2020, he did the unthinkable. Celeste Manno was supposed to have her whole life ahead of her. But instead, her story became a cautionary tale, a devastating reminder of the dangers of stalking. Who was Louis Seiko? How did his obsession spiral into murder? And most importantly, why wasn't he stopped before it was too late? Celeste Manno was a bright, ambitious young woman, a daughter, a friend, a sister. She had dreams, a promising future. But all of that was stolen from her in an act of pure evil. Louis Seiko was an acquaintance, a former co-worker, and a man who couldn't accept rejection. His infatuation turned to fixation. His fixation turned to violence. This is the story of a woman who saw the danger coming, and a system that failed to protect her. And now her family fights for change, demanding stricter laws against stalking so that no one else has to suffer the way Celeste did. How did it come to this? To understand that, we need to go back to the beginning. Before the headlines, before the tragedy, before her name became a symbol of justice, Celeste Manno was simply a young woman full of life, love, and ambition. Born in 1997 in Melbourne, Australia, Celeste was the heart of her family. Raised in a warm and loving Italian-Australian household, she grew up surrounded by laughter, support, and a deep sense of kindness. She was intelligent, driven, recently graduating from La Trobe University with a world of possibilities ahead of her. She had dreams, plans, a future waiting to be written. To those who knew her, Celeste wasn't just kind, she was radiant. The kind of person who lit up a room, who made people feel seen, heard, and valued. Her mother, Aggie Manno, describes Celeste as her best friend. They shared everything, their dreams, their struggles, their everyday moments. She was the glue of their family. A loving daughter, a devoted sister. She had a bond with her family that was unbreakable. Outside of her family, Celeste had passions that defined her. She loved helping people, finding joy in creativity, always eager to learn and grow. She had dreams that stretched far beyond the walls of her home. A life she was building one step at a time. But everything changed when she met Louis Seiko. In 2019, Celeste began working at Serco, a customer service call center. Like any young graduate, she saw it as a stepping stone, a place to gain experience before moving on to bigger things. She was well liked by her colleagues, known for her kindness and patience. But among those co-workers, was someone who saw her in a way no one else did. Louis Seiko worked at the same call center. A quiet, withdrawn man who barely spoke to Celeste. To her, he was just another employee. But to him, she was something else entirely. It started with passing glances. Nothing unusual, nothing alarming. But in his mind, a dangerous fixation was beginning to take hold. Celeste had no idea that a seemingly normal coworker would soon become her worst nightmare. That a simple act of kindness would fuel a deadly obsession. And the moment she rejected him was the moment he decided she would pay the price. The stalking had begun. And no one could have predicted just how far he was willing to go. While Celeste Manno was surrounded by love, family, and a bright future, the man who would one day take her life lived in a world of darkness and obsession. Louis Seiko was born in Iraq but later moved to Australia. His past remains largely unknown, but what is clear is that his life was filled with turmoil long before he met Celeste. Those who knew him described him as socially awkward, a man who struggled to fit in. But beneath the surface, there was something much darker. He suffered from severe mental health issues, something that would later become a major part of his legal defense. But was it an excuse, or a warning sign that was ignored? Celeste and Louis Seiko crossed paths in the most ordinary of places, a call center in Melbourne. To her, he was just another co-worker. To him, she became something much more. They had barely spoken. Their interactions were brief, professional. But for a man like Louis Seiko, a simple act of kindness was enough to create an illusion. It started with messages. At first friendly, harmless. But soon the frequency increased, and so did the intensity. Celeste responded politely at first. But when his attention became overwhelming, she did what any woman would do, she pulled away. In time, Celeste left the job, moving on to bigger things. She never gave Louis Seiko another thought. But for him, her absence only made his obsession stronger. He couldn't let go. He couldn't accept that she had moved on. In his mind, Celeste belonged to him. Celeste took the first step to protect herself. She blocked him. She made it clear she wanted nothing to do with him. But for men like Louis Seiko, no is never an answer. He created fake accounts. He found new ways to message her. Each attempt more desperate than the last. The messages took a darker turn. No longer friendly. No longer subtle. His obsession was turning into something dangerous. Celeste's family and friends noticed the warning signs. They saw his messages. They knew something wasn't right. But what could they do? Time and time again, stories like this play out the same way. A woman raises concerns. A man is warned. But nothing truly stops him, until it's too late. Louis Seiko had made up his mind. If he couldn't have Celeste Manno, then no one could. And on one fateful night, he decided to act. The night of November 16, 2020, would be Celeste Manno's last. In the weeks leading up to her murder, Celeste Manno couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. And she was right. Friends and family later recalled that Celeste had started expressing concern. Something didn't feel right. But she couldn't prove it. Meanwhile, Louis Seiko was growing bolder. His online posts became increasingly cryptic. Dark. Ominous. As if he knew something terrible was about to happen. Celeste confided in her mother. She told her she was worried, that something was off. But like so many women before her, she had no idea just how much danger she was in. November 16, 2020. Celeste Manno went to bed like any other night, completely unaware that outside in the darkness, someone was coming for her. Louis Seiko had made up his mind. He got into his car, drove through the quiet streets of Melbourne, and parked just down the road from Celeste's home. No one saw him. No one heard him. He had come prepared. While Celeste slept peacefully in her bedroom, the man who had stalked her for months was standing right outside her window. He wasn't just here to watch this time. He was here to end it. In the dead of night, as her family slept, Louis Seiko forced his way inside. No alarms. No warning. He knew exactly where to go. He had memorized the layout of her home. Every step was calculated. Celeste never saw him coming. The attack was brutal. Frenzied. Fueled by months of rejection and obsession. Louis Seiko didn't just kill Celeste Manno, he made sure it was personal. By the time it was over, the room was silent. Celeste Manno, just 23 years old, was gone. But her mother was about to wake up to a nightmare. What she found inside would haunt her forever. But the question remained, where was Louis Seiko? And how did this case unfold in the hours that followed? The quiet Melbourne neighborhood was about to wake up to horror. It was just past 4 a.m. when the first call came in. A frantic voice. Incoherent sobbing. A mother's worst nightmare spilling into the receiver. Within minutes, officers arrived at the Manno family home. What they saw inside would haunt even the most seasoned detectives. Inside Celeste's bedroom, the brutal aftermath of a frenzied attack. Blood. Signs of a struggle. And a young woman whose life had been stolen far too soon. Detectives knew this wasn't a random act of violence. This was personal. This was obsession turned deadly. But what they didn't know was that the killer had already come forward. Just as officers were securing the crime scene, 35-year-old Louis Seiko walked into a police station, his clothes soaked in blood. The desk sergeant barely had time to process what he was looking at before Seiko spoke the words that would change everything. In a chilling monotone, he admitted to everything. I killed Celeste Manno. He didn't try to hide it. He didn't beg for a lawyer. He had done what he came to do, and now he was ready to face the consequences. Or so it seemed. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a disturbing digital trail. Messages. Posts. Warnings that had gone unanswered. Celeste had done everything right. She had blocked him. She had ignored his advances. But Seiko? He refused to let go. Investigators pieced together the timeline. From the moment Seiko fixated on Celeste at work, to the night he broke into her home. A case study in obsession and failure to intervene. Then came the inevitable question, was he mentally ill? Or was this a cold, calculated murder? Psychiatrists were brought in to evaluate Seiko. He claimed he was not in his right mind, that he snapped. But was that true? Or was it just a desperate attempt to escape justice? As the legal battle unfolded, the prosecution had a different argument. Seiko knew exactly what he was doing. And Celeste Manno paid the price. Celeste's mother, Aggie Manno, became the voice of a movement she never wanted to lead. She refused to let her daughter's murder become just another statistic. The community erupted in outrage. Why wasn't this prevented? Why did Celeste have to die before her cries for help were heard? Laws were scrutinized. Policies questioned. Could this have been stopped? And more importantly, how many more lives were at risk? Louis Seiko was behind bars. But would he ever truly pay for what he had done? And would Celeste Manno's tragic death finally spark the change she, and so many others, deserved? The case wasn't over yet. The trial was coming. And with it, a fight for justice that would shake the nation. For 3 long years, Celeste Manno's family waited. 3 years of grief. 3 years of unanswered questions. And finally, in November of 2023, they faced the man who had taken her life. As the trial began, there were no more denials. No elaborate excuses. Louis Seiko pleaded guilty to the murder of Celeste Manno. But was it enough? His defense team argued that he was suffering from severe mental illness, that he wasn't in control of his actions. His lawyers painted him as a deeply disturbed man, unfit to be held fully accountable. But the prosecution, they saw something different. They saw premeditation. They presented the messages, the social media posts, the disturbing obsession that grew day by day unchecked. This wasn't the act of a man who lost control. This was a man who knew exactly what he was doing. And so, the court handed down its decision. Louis Seiko was sentenced to life in prison. A victory, but a hollow one. Because no sentence could bring Celeste back. For Celeste's mother, Aggie Manno, the fight wasn't over. Because her daughter had done everything she could to protect herself, and it hadn't been enough. Aggie Manno became an advocate, pushing for stricter stalking laws in Australia. She spoke out, demanding action. Demanding that no other family suffer the same fate. And finally, people listened. The conversation around stalking laws gained momentum. But the question remains, will real change happen? Or will it take another life before action is truly taken? Celeste Manno should still be here. She should have been safe in her own home. But a system that failed to act cost her everything. Her story is not just a tragedy, it's a wake-up call. And now the question is, will we listen? What do you think? Do stalking laws need to change? Should more be done to protect victims before it's too late? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And this isn't the first time stalking has turned deadly. In my next video, I cover another horrifying case that will leave you speechless. Click here to watch now.